A bloody footprint left at the scene of a murder led police on a decades-long hunt.
It was quite the discovery in 1993, and just as valuable years later when police made an arrest.
Jeanie Childs was remembered by her family as a free spirit, a woman who accepted everyone for who they were. She loved to dance, sing, and enjoy music, especially Lionel Richie. Whenever his songs played, Jeanie would snap her fingers, laugh, and move around with joy. She loved people, old and young, and had a special kindness toward children. Even though she could not have children of her own, she cared deeply for others, showing warmth and affection in ways that made her unforgettable. But behind her bright spirit was a painful past. From an early age, Jeanie felt unwanted. Her father had hoped for a son and paid little attention to her. This left a wound that never fully healed. Her mother and sister recalled how she changed after something troubling happened when she was very small. It seemed as though she lost part of her spirit that day. Despite this, her family loved her deeply, describing her as both troubled and happy, a mix of strength and fragility. As a teenager, Jeanie struggled to stay on the right path. She often ran away from home, leaving her mother crying through sleepless nights, searching in dark places to bring her back. Drugs and the wrong crowd pulled her further away from her family. Her mother tried counseling, but Jeanie rarely showed up. She would call in the middle of the night, crying, trapped by the people who controlled her with addiction. Her sister remembered how painful it was to watch Jeanie drift further into a dangerous lifestyle. Even with these struggles, Jeanie's heart shone through. She wrote letters filled with love for her family, urging them not to repeat her mistakes. In her words, she showed regret, hope, and deep affection. She wanted her loved ones to have the best life possible, even if she could not find it for herself. Jeanie's story was one of beauty mixed with hardship, of a woman who lived freely but carried hidden battles that shaped her path. The murder scene on June 13, 1993. The quiet of South Minneapolis was broken by a horrifying discovery inside the Horn Towers apartments. Neighbors had reported water flooding into their unit. When the building superintendent checked, he found a running shower. But what he uncovered next was something no one could forget. Inside the bedroom of the apartment lay the lifeless body of Jeanie Childs. The crime scene was brutal. Jeanie had been stabbed dozens of times. Later, the autopsy would reveal between 60 and 65 wounds. Her body was left nude except for blood-soaked white socks. Blood covered the sheets, the comforter, and even soaked deep into the mattress. The violence told investigators that Jeanie had fought desperately for her life. Impact stains on the bathroom walls revealed she had been attacked while standing, moving, trying to escape. In another room, a pillow was smeared with blood, showing she had been injured and left bleeding heavily on the bed. For her mother, the details were unbearable. She believed her daughter must have been calling out for her during those final moments. That thought haunted her, leaving a pain she carried for the rest of her life. She had dressed Jeanie in a black dress with gloves at the funeral to cover the defensive wounds carved into her hands. The investigators, hardened by years of experience, were shaken by what they saw. The level of rage shown in the stabbing, and the fact that Jeanie's stomach was cut open after her death, spoke of anger beyond comprehension. What stood out most to the crime scene experts, however, was not only the blood but something left behind, something rare and valuable. A clear footprint, not a shoe print, but the impression of a bare foot pressed into her blood. It was a haunting signature and possibly the most important clue left at the scene. Bloody footprint evidence. Among all the chaos of the crime scene, one piece of evidence stood out as extraordinary: the bloody footprint. It wasn't from a shoe but from a bare foot that had stepped directly into Jeanie's blood. Investigators immediately understood the importance of this. Jeanie had been wearing socks, which meant the print did not belong to her. Whoever left it was most likely her killer. Just like fingerprints, a footprint could be matched to a specific person, making it a rare but powerful form of identification. The crime scene team worked carefully to preserve the impression. Photographs were taken, and chemical treatments were used to make the details sharper. The prints were then lifted so they could be compared with potential suspects in the future. Detectives wrote in their reports that these impressions were highly significant and could one day solve the case. At the time, they collected footprints from several suspects, including Jeanie's boyfriend, Art, who was immediately under suspicion. But his prints did not match, and his alibi placed him far away on the night of the murder. Years later, when cold case investigators reopened the file, the footprint evidence remained at the center of their efforts. Analysts compared the ridges, curves, and unique patterns of the bloody print against those of suspects. Forensic experts explained that the science of friction skin, whether on fingers, palms, or the soles of feet, does not change. The footprint carried unique identifiers just like a fingerprint. To Jeanie's family, the discovery of that print was both chilling and hopeful. Chilling, because it meant her killer had walked through the scene with bare feet, leaving behind a mark of arrogance or carelessness. Hopeful, because that same carelessness could be the thread that unraveled the mystery. For nearly 3 decades, that bloody footprint remained a silent witness to Jeannie's murder, waiting for the day science and persistence would reveal who it belonged to. DNA leads to a suspect for many years. Jeanie Childs' case grew cold. Detectives had suspects, but no solid proof. The bloody footprint remained unmatched, and though semen was collected from the crime scene, the technology of the early 1990s could not give investigators the answers they needed. But decades later, DNA testing had advanced. What once seemed like a dead end became a chance for justice. In 2015, the FBI and Minneapolis police reopened the case. They carefully reviewed evidence from Jeannie's apartment, focusing on items like a blue towel, a washcloth, and the comforter. Each of these contained DNA. Analysts confirmed the same male profile appeared across several items, strongly suggesting it belonged to the killer. Yet, no name was attached to that DNA. The breakthrough finally came years later when investigators used a new tool, genetic genealogy, the same method that helped catch the Golden State Killer. By uploading the DNA into genealogy databases, investigators were able to trace family connections and build a family tree that led to 2 brothers. One brother stood out. His name was Jerry Westrom, a Minnesota businessman and family man with a history of soliciting prostitutes in the 1990s. Investigators followed him quietly, waiting for the chance to collect something he discarded. At a hockey game, they got what they needed, a napkin Westrom used and threw away. When tested, the DNA matched the profile from Jeannie's apartment. It was the first real link between her murder and a living suspect. This discovery was the turning point. The bloody footprint already suggested a unique identifier, but now DNA placed Westrom inside Jeannie's apartment the night she was killed. The science was clear. Whoever left those traces was the killer. After more than 2 decades of waiting, detectives finally had a name and the evidence to make an arrest. Trial and justice in 2019, nearly 3 decades after Jeanie Childs was murdered, police arrested Jerry Westrom. The man once seen as a respected businessman and hockey dad now stood accused of a brutal killing that had haunted Minneapolis since 1993. Investigators had matched his DNA from the discarded napkin to the semen found on Jeannie's bedding and towel. They also compared his footprints with the bloody impressions left at the crime scene. For prosecutors, these 2 pieces, the DNA and the footprint, formed a powerful case. When the trial began in 2022, the courtroom carried decades of grief and tension. Prosecutors described how Westrom's attack was deliberate and merciless, pointing to the overwhelming evidence that placed him inside Jeannie's apartment. They reminded the jury of the 60 stab wounds, the blood-soaked bed, and the killer's decision to leave a running shower. The defense, however, tried to cast doubt, suggesting investigators had the wrong man and pointing fingers at Jeannie's pimp, whose hairs were found at the scene. They argued that DNA alone could not prove intent or murder. But the jury was not convinced. They deliberated for only 2 hours before reaching a unanimous verdict. Jerry Westrom was guilty of first-degree premeditated murder and second-degree murder. For Jeannie's family, the verdict was both relief and sorrow. They had waited nearly 30 years for justice, yet the loss remained just as deep. Westrom was sentenced to life in prison, closing a chapter that had haunted them for decades. The bloody footprint and DNA told the story no witness could. In the end, it was science, persistence, and a mother's refusal to give up that brought justice for Jeanie Childs. Justice for Jeanie Childs came after nearly 30 years, thanks to science, persistence, and a mother who never gave up. Her story reminds us how footprints, DNA, and determination can expose the truth even decades later. But justice never erases the pain of loss. It only gives answers. If you found this story powerful, don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more true crime documentaries. Now, here's a question for you. Do you believe justice delayed still delivers closure, or does time make the truth harder to accept? Share your thoughts in the comments below.